Well, how are you, my dear friend? Welcome to this beautiful evening, this late night broadcast here, 9 p.m., Trig Podcast of Joy, Goso TV. Checking in, how are you really doing? You know how people will often ask, how are you doing? You're like, fine, great. Well, I wanted to start something here maybe in the evenings around 9 p.m. or so called Checking In, How Are You Really Doing? And to have you leave me a comment, below. So leave me a comment below, say hello, how are you? And maybe you can just type in one of these few words. I'm going to give you a few ideas on what to type. Let's see here. I'm going to, I think I have, let's see here. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to change what this says. So here's some ideas of what you can say. You can say scale from 1 to 10. Let's see, scale from 1 to 10. How are you really doing? All right, so there's a little question that will help us. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how are you really doing? Hello, Mr. David Nichols. Wonderful to have you, my dear friend. By the way, see how awesome that is? You can just leave your comment and you are famous. That's 15 seconds of fame. Hello, my dear brother David. I love you so much. God bless you and your church. So scale from 1 to 10, David, how are you really doing? 1 being, hanging in there. 10 being that you haven't felt a lot of stress this week. You've been keeping your head clear. And somewhere in the middle, of course, is probably where we're all at. So where have I been at this week? Well, let me start with kind of how I'm really doing behind all of the gozo and the scenes and the stuff that you see. How are we really doing? So I would say that I've probably been at a 6 or 7. It would be my guess. I wonder if that's higher than truthfully, right? 6, yeah. So my brother David says 6. So I would say that for me, it's been a 6 or a 7 as well. Let me explain what I mean. Definitely Sunday seems to be the height of the week. Now, if you are in church leadership, like I am, Sundays can be kind of one of those, I don't know, like one of those, it can be either great or bad, right? It can be either a 9 or a 10, or it can be a 1 and a 2, because this is kind of that height. This is the day that we as leaders, especially now with all these online tools, we really want to see God work, and we hope people show up and stuff. So it can be one of those kind of interesting days. But I would say that for me, it's been, even with all that said, a 6, 7. I think my low point was maybe last night or maybe 2 nights ago, Friday, Saturday night, when I hardly slept, just tossing and turning, worrying, thinking about a million things. And then I would say maybe the best moment was actually today after church, or after our service online. I went out to church, to my job, my office, and just did a couple of videos. And maybe if you want to see those, you can check them out on my Neighborhood Christian page. And that really kind of got me moving. Just I think being inside the house for most of us is kind of just a really tiring thing. It can be pretty bad on your mental health, right? Have you ever been so aware of your health mentally? We all think about our physical health, our spiritual health, but for some of us, mental health is the most important thing. And so how are you doing with your mental health? Now, what does that mean, your mind health? Well, it means your anxiety, your fear, your worry. It means all those things that we never talk about. And if you are an empath, if you are a creative, if you are someone like me that, a lot of us, especially that watch me, we are people that love to help others. It can be really tough on us to go through these seasons because we absorb people's feelings. We don't process information, let's say from the CDC or from AP News, quote, just with our left brain. We process it through our emotions. Now, everyone does this, but for us who are empaths, that stuff kind of lingers in there and can kind of stick around a little longer than for others. And so I've kind of measured it, or I've kind of timed how long that stuff takes to get out of my system. And if I'm having a good day, I'll get rid of that stuff maybe in, I don't know, an hour, maybe half an hour, maybe even less. But if I'm having one of those tough days or tough weeks, it could take me 24 to 48 hours to kind of cleanse, detox from all of that negativity. Now, that negativity might just be one scene. Like, I don't know what I saw this week. I read something. You know how you just are trying not to read anything and yet it just kind of hits you. For whatever it was, it took me maybe, I don't know, an hour or two to get that out of my system. Now, here's a tip for you, a pro tip, if you are an empath, or if you are married to an empath, or you have kids that are empaths. Let the person that you're in relationship with know that you're working it out. So, for example, obviously for my wife and I, she's not an empath, meaning she's very practical. So we're a great team. So when she sees me tanking empathetically, then obviously she wants to fix it. She wants to help. She wants to do something so I can snap out of it. But what helps, especially what helps us in our relationship, in our marriage, through the years, it's helped for me to tell her I'm working it out. So if you are as the man, now this is, let me speak to the men that might be out there. Men, we get a bad rap. We can't be weak because that's not manly. And then we can't be too strong because then that's too, I don't know, you're too macho. So a lot of times we as men are in this limbo, kind of in between a rock and a hard place. Because, for example, even though obviously my wife loves me, I am always kind of just, I'm always feeling bad if I am too in the gutter or in the dumps, you know. Now, let me say that's not always bad. Sometimes that kind of that boundary or that kind of that wall per se or that resistance is good for me because it wakes me up. On the other hand, other times her patience with me is what helps me heal. Now, if you're alone, let's say you're by yourself and you just have the TV or you have whatever, the phone these days, you have to kind of know yourself. You may not have someone to talk to, but you might be going to addictions, drinking. I read a statistic this morning that alcohol purchase is up 300%. I was literally driving back home from church today, as I mentioned, and I had just read the statistic this morning, and I saw this young man, maybe in his mid-20s, carrying this huge box, and I thought, wow, I wonder if he bought like a TV or food. It was beer. It was a huge, 24-pack or 58, I don't know. He could hardly carry it into his car, and he looked happier than a kid on Christmas Day. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense, right? And so you have to know if you don't, quote, empath, or you don't tank by moping around the house, maybe you're tanking by drinking. Pornography is also going through the roof. Domestic violence. Now, you may not be someone who's beating anybody up, but what if you're maybe telling yourself a bunch of negative things? Those are the things that we call mental health. Those are the things that we have to manage. I have a friend who he smokes. I saw him, was it this morning or maybe yesterday morning? Yeah, Saturday, maybe like around 9 a.m., 8:30. And he was already, you could tell maybe on his second pack. He started, I wonder if he even slept because he looked pretty bad. So now I'm not saying that to beat anybody up. My point is you have to be self-aware. For me, my addiction, as I've said, is empathy. And then which leads into anxiety, which leads into moping around. Now, what's helped me, and maybe this can help you, as you know, I'm a certified anxiety coach, and so I've learned a ton of stuff. It doesn't mean I don't deal with it, but I've learned a lot of practical tools. So one of the things that really helps me, in case you or someone that you love tends to be an empath, is an empath, and might be struggling in these times, maybe your daughter, your son, someone you love. What helps me is to understand the consequence of my giving in to fear. And I literally have a piece of paper. I actually have it just on the other side of the room, where I've written out maybe 25 things that being in my anxious cycle does. So, for example, practical things. So last week, my wife's car, her windshield wiper motor died. And so it only worked on super high speed, and it was raining last week. And so it was kind of a big deal. Now, because I had been giving in to my fear, normally I would go out there and get that thing fixed. I would get the best mechanic. I would call a bunch of people. I would get the best price, go drive it in myself at 8 a.m., just do the thing that I love to do. I love doing that. But because I was giving in to all this stuff, the car sat there for like a week. And then my poor wife was kind of, thankfully it stopped raining, but like most of our wives, most people that we love, she wants her car to work. And so I put that on my list. When I give in to my fear, even though maybe that consequence may not seem like that big of a deal, it is a huge deal for me, for her, for our relationship, for my joy. And so when I am giving into this stuff too much, into my chaos, whatever, into my empathy, I take out that list of all those things that I am defaulting on. And then that might be like the negative way to do it, but which is important. But the positive way to do that is I also write down all the things that I do when I'm in my courage. And so, for example, I wrote down getting my wife's car fixed, and I specifically wrote her windshield wipers. Another thing that, that I've written on that list is record these videos. I don't know how many people are. I think a few people here online. Thank you, by the way, for being here. Sometimes I'll have maybe it's not about how many. The point is I'll have people that really need to hear this message. Whether it's something from the Bible or just my thoughts or maybe a song or my silly Goso DJing, all the things that I do here. And if I default on my gifts and I give in to the worst of me, then I don't come on here. I don't encourage somebody else. Now, if you're into personality stuff, I am an Enneagram 3. And I won't go into it. I have done a bunch of videos on Enneagram stuff. It's very, very powerful stuff, especially how we all tend to react when under stress. So as a 3, my gift is to achieve, to get things done, to clarify things for other people, to inspire others. That's one of the things that I love most about being on here. And people often tell me is, man, you are inspiring me. Now, if I give in to the worst of me, if I'm at a 1 or a 2 on the scale of how I'm really doing, which I've had those days, no doubt, then I default on showing up for you, showing up for my kids, showing up for my lovely wife, showing up for myself. And then that only feeds kind of that horrible cycle of feeling worse and less than, and so the ball gets rolling, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of the things that is really affecting me these days is, hello, my brother David, welcome, glad to see you here, talking about empathy and talking about how to overcome those empathetic kind of obstacles and how to show up and how to be the best versions of ourselves. Because, Jesus, it says in the Bible that he grew in stature and in wisdom. A lot of people sometimes they say, well, we shouldn't be talking about personality stuff if you're a Christian. Well, Jesus, remember, even the Bible says he grew in wisdom, which is what you would consider spiritual life, right? Our spiritual wisdom. But also it says that he grew in stature. In other words, he also grew physically. And when we talk about some of these things, we're dealing with the physical part of us. Don't you wish that we were already in our resurrected bodies, glorified bodies? Of course, but guess what? We're not. And so we have to still deal with this flesh. The Bible is very clear. Now, the Bible, or we as preachers or Christians, we often talk about our body as sin and as the flesh, meaning sin. But the flesh isn't just a sinful bag of bones. It also carries emotions. It also carries our past, our trauma. If you are, let's say, a veteran, you know a lot about PTSD. And so my point is that even as Christians, we have to talk about, thank you so much, David, for sharing. We have to talk about the stature, the physical, the emotional, the psychological part of us, because we are not glorified. And so anyway, back to empathy. One of the tips that I have gained, as I said, is to make a list of the things that you are called to do. So, for example, another thing that I am called to do is to preach the gospel. Now, if I give in to that lower self, to that low side of my gifting, let's say if I give in my case, to fear and anxiety. And I don't judge myself, by the way, as we'll talk about judgment here in a second, but I don't judge myself when I'm in that mode. And I have talked to my wife, and she doesn't judge me either. And so all these things are things that we can talk about. There's so many kind of branches or arrows or kind of different aspects of what I'm talking about. But just to kind of stick to the point, what I've learned is to not judge myself and to recognize my gifts. You have to understand what your true calling is. Your true calling might be to preach the gospel. So, for example, as I was saying, for me, I know that my calling in life is to preach the gospel through His word, through song, through these videos, to tell people about Jesus, about salvation found in Jesus' name. Now, if I give in to those lower sides of me, to that old self, as the Bible calls it, to that false self, to the sinful nature, to the flesh, the same stuff that we're talking about here, what happens? We don't lose our salvation, or we don't lose eternity. Instead, we default on the fruitfulness that we're supposed to bring to the world. Wow, I'm preaching now. I don't want to preach. I already did it this morning, but I can't help it. John 15 says, "Abide in me, and I will abide in you. Without me, you can bear no fruit." Now, what is that fruit? It's not just salvation or loving people. It's also, for me, changing the motor in my wife's car. That's the fruitfulness of me being abiding in Christ, of me being connected to Jesus. If I am disconnected from God or from myself or from my truth, then that branch breaks off the vine, and I'm not going to change my wife's motor in her car. Just for the windshield wipers, not the whole engine. I'm not that good at car stuff. But my point is, you and I, all of us, we have to stay strong in Jesus, in our personality, knowing our bents, so that we show up. So as I said, I show up by inspiring you. But if I give in to that other side of me, to that over empathetic, over fearful, over catastrophizing me, and if I don't have a plan to overcome that, then I'm going to show up less and less and less. Now, what is that plan? Thank God. Thank you, Lord, thank you, David, for sharing. Yeah, thank you, Ann. Great topic. Absolutely. Now, if I don't show up, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. What's the plan then? Okay. So back to Enneagram stuff. And if you want to learn more about the Enneagram, check out some of my earlier videos on YouTube, especially. Facebook, is really bad at categorizing or cataloging videos, but YouTube is great. That's why I love YouTube, because you can just go through all of my videos there. But anyway, there's one on YouTube there that it talks about the Enneagram. So again, it's like personality stuff, but I think it's much more spiritual and much deeper, in my opinion. But anyway, so what was I saying? When you know your type, there are things that you do under stress. So let me go through the 9 types pretty quickly, so you kind of get a sense for how you might tend to operate under stress based on your Enneagram number. So there are 9 Enneagram numbers, okay? So if you're a 1, now each number goes to stress or can go towards health, okay? So because we're in this season of all this stuff, we'll talk about stress. Okay, so 1 is called a reformer. Now the reformer, let me actually get my chart out here, my handy dandy notebook, so that I can really, really get this right, okay? Because there are so many things that I must confess sometimes I might get 1 or 2 of these things a bit confused. So actually, let me put it on the screen. I think I can do this. Let me see with all of my stuff here if I can do that for you. Okay, so there's that. And then let's see, can you see that? Okay, you can almost see it. So let me just move this over here. And then there you go. Okay, so I know it's kind of small. I'm going to make it bigger a little bit there. Okay, so that I think will help you some there. Okay, so these are the 9 types of the Enneagram. Personality stuff, very spiritual. Okay, this is very spiritual in its, a lot of Christians, a lot of people of God, this is very helpful. So if you're a 1, so if you see in that corner there, the 1, they call the perfectionist or the reformer. I like the bold letters more than the other ones because it's more positive. And perfectionist, though, it is also kind of the deadly sin of each one of these. So anyway, so the reformer, now under stress, notice how these arrows work. Under stress, the one, notice how that arrow that goes or that's coming from the 4, and then there's an arrow that's going to the 7. Do you see that? So the 1, if you are a reformer, meaning you're someone who is very black and white, okay? Maybe your wife or your son is very black and white. Maybe you have an in-law. It's very black and white. They see things as right or wrong. There is no gray for them. I'm not a 1. If you are a 1, in times of stress, you tend to go to the artist. Now, that sounds really awesome. The problem is that the artist is very individualistic. And so if you are a reformer under stress, you may tend to go towards the woe is me type of person. Someone who's like, oh, I'm the only one who's suffering right now. Only I am hanging on to God. Only I really care about this family. So you may, if you resonate with a little bit of that, or a lot, then you might be a 1. And I'll talk about kind of how to overcome some of these things. Okay, so now if you're a 2, what they call the helper, the 2, let's see here, goes to the 8. See how the black arrow comes in? That's how you want to read that. The arrow that's coming into you is how you tend to be under stress. So you become this boss. Again, we're going to go to the low side of each number. So the 2, let me define the 2. The 2 is someone who is just those very helpful people. I call these the hospitality types. Maybe you are this way. You know how some people, they have the gift, even the Bible talks about it, 1 Corinthians 12, that there is a gift of hospitality. Well, those are the helpers, the givers. People that will literally take the shirt off their backs. Men, women, doesn't have to be women only. Now, under stress, again, during these times, the 2s, those helpers, go to 8, to the low side of 8. Instead of becoming helpful, they become very bossy. They can begin to criticize you, boss you around, kind of maybe be a little heavy with their words. So if you are a helper, and if you're relating to what I'm saying, you might be a 2. So you might want to be aware of not giving into that side of you. A 3, I'm a 3, by the way. So this is very me, and I've learned a lot. So I'm a performer, a motivator. This is how God made me since I was a little boy. I've always performed, meaning with my guitar or speaking to others, and always motivating. Now, if I'm not careful, the 3 can go to the 9 under stress, which sounds great like a mediator, right? Or a peacemaker. But the low side of 9 is called the sloth or the procrastinator or the lazy type. Now, I would say from personal experience, and I've been studying this for 10 years or so, that I don't turn lazy, but I begin to not show up. Maybe I'll go days just not doing these videos. And it's not because I'm busy. It's because I'm giving in to that fear. And so I become an unhealthy, quote, peaceful person. I become too peaceful, meaning I give in to the fear, to the stress, and I check out of life. Maybe that would be a better way to put it. So maybe that's you. Number 4, let's keep going. The artist. Now, this has nothing to do with music. I also have a little bit of that 4. But this has nothing to do with music per se or with painting. It could. But really, the 4 is what they call the individualist. It's someone who doesn't want to blend in with the crowd. They are very much about doing things their own way. They could be very creative musically or painting or writing. But what really defines the 4 is that they want to see things in their own unique way. They want to leave a unique stamp on life. So you may have a child, a daughter, a son, a friend who is a 4. Now, the 4, if they're not careful, they go to the low side of 2, which is the helper. Now, I thought that I was a 4. So I'm going to kind of be a 4 right now, just so I can help you understand what the 4 can tend to struggle with in terms of this helper. So if you have someone who is very creative, a daughter, a son, maybe you yourself, when you're under stress, you tend to go to that helper, which really is what we call codependency. Codependency. So if I'm a 4, which again, at times I've thought I was, and maybe I'm like a 3-wing 4, they call it, or a 4-wing 3. Anyway, I become very clingy with Rochelle. So last week, here's a perfect example. She's been at the house here like all of us stuck all week. And, she's a worker bee. My wife, man, she likes to go and, she's a principal, 400 kids, 25 teachers, but she's been here at home, stuck at home. Well, last Wednesday, she went out for a drive for like an hour and a half, and she never does it. And I'm like, oh my God, where is she going? She left me. She moved away. She took all the kids. I'm in this stress, imagining the worst, clinging to her because I'm under stress. None of that is true. She went for a drive, wanting to find a place where we could maybe this week go out together as a family and go spend time at the beach or something, normal stuff. But under stress, the 4 becomes very clingy, almost like very like wondering, are you going to leave me? They become almost like a conspiracy theorist kind of person. Like they must be leaving me. That abandonment thing can really be strong. A lot of 4s in churches, a lot of 4s and 2s in churches, because again, we're the feelers, we're the empaths, the helpers, hospitality types. A lot of leaders in churches tend to be 3s or 7, just FYI, or 8s, meaning pastors and these kind of guys. 5, the observer, the thinker. These are people who are very analytical. You might have a wife, a friend, a husband, a boss who's very analytical. They view life through numbers, through data. I have a friend online who, with all this stuff, all he posts are numbers. He's a follower of Jesus. His dad's a pastor, but he never talks about God is good or, the Lord is my shepherd. It's always data, data, data. That's how he thinks and processes life. Now, if the 5 is not careful, he can go to the 7, who is the generalist, or they call this person the adventure seeker. Basically, they can become reckless. The 5 can become reckless. Yeah, and there are combinations. Yeah, what they call wings, so not combinations as in like the DISC or the Myers-Briggs, but they will, what the Enneagram uses is more wings. So for example, let's say you're a 4, you might be a 4 wing 3 or a 4 wing 5. And the 4, the wings talk about the numbers to the left or to the right. So yeah, let me know what you think you are, and maybe I can help you understand a little bit more of your unique type, and then the wings and a couple other things that are out there called subtypes. Anyway, so the observer can become reckless. Let me keep going. The 6, the loyalists. These are people that are very, very faithful, very loyal, very committed to a cause. There are people that respect authority. They are people that, in churches, there are a lot of 6s, people that really want to support the ministry, really are committed to their faith. Come hell or high water, they're going to be committed to their faith, to their church, to their marriage, to that job. They will suffer in silence. They will suffer. They will put themselves last. Again, the 2 can tend to do that. Not so much the other numbers, but definitely the 2, the 6 will suffer more than any of the other types because they are faithful. Now, when the 6 is in trouble, when they are under stress, they can become an unhealthy 3, meaning they will overachieve. They will push themselves to the limit. Instead of being their normal, loyal and faithful and committed to the cause, they will have so much panic, they feel they have to do more than expected of them because they're afraid of losing that loyalty from that authority figure. Okay, 7, the generalist, or what they call other people call it the adventure seeker, or I call it the joy person. Even though I am the Gozo man, I used to think I was a 7, but I'm not, I'm a 3. But 7s are people that truly love adventure. They are just people that just can laugh at life no matter what. My mom is a 7. That's why I call her Mama Gozo. Because she's been through so much, and yet if you look at my mom, this is where I get it from. She has a smile on her face that comes from the Lord. Truly, these are the people that can say the joy of the Lord is my strength. Now, what happens to the 7 when they're under stress? They go to that performer, to that reformer, to the low side of 1. They can become very strict, overly black and white, overly perfectionist, because they're under stress. And then the 8, well, I guess 2 more. The 8, the leader, the natural born leader, the boss. Again, a lot of pastors and CEOs are either 3, 7s, or 8s. And so these are the people in your company or at your school that are in charge. It could be your kid. It could be yourself. Now, the 8, if they're under stress, like these days, they go to the low side of 5, which is analytical. So one of our daughters is an 8. And when we were just beginning to do all this stuff, I noticed her, instead of being her normal, like kind of like boss woman and kind of like, just making things better for everyone and leading, she was very analytical. Like, I'm like, what's going on? Oh, under stress, that 8 goes to overthinking. And so that might be you. Now, the 9, the final one, here's a peacemaker. I love the 9s. One of my daughters also is a 9. I love 9s. Probably my favorite number. So the 9s and the 7s. I love them all, really. But the 9s, I love the 1. My wife is a 1. Rochelle is a 1. And so she helps me. The 3 and the 1 are so good together because, when I'm like trying to do too much, she kind of like says, nope, this is what's right. This is what's wrong. Don't bend any rules. Don't cut any corners. Anyway, so the 9 is really at the top of this whole thing. They call them the seers. I always think they're the Jesus figures. I mean, all of us have obviously an identity in Christ, and we're all made in the image of God. But the 9 is, that's what I call it, the Jesus figure, because Jesus is the Prince of Peace, right? So you might be someone that's a 9. There are a lot of people. I love 9s. They are those conflict resolution experts. They can bring opposing views to the table and find a common ground. What a gift. Don't you wish more presidents were 9s? Most presidents, by the way, tend to be 3s or 7s or 8s. I don't know. We're all needed in this world, aren't we? But the 9, on the low side, when under stress, they tend to go to the 6, to the overly loyal. In other words, they fall asleep at the wheel. So Anne says 2, 3, 4, or 9. Okay. So 2, 3, and the 4. So I'm noticing here, and that Anne says for 2, 3, and 4. Notice how the 2, 3, and 4 are all under this triangle called image. They're all connected. The 2, the 3, and the 4. They call the 2, 3, and the 4 the heart triad. Triad meaning 3. So just from what you're saying, my guess is that you're either a 2, 3, and the 4. And it would be interesting to work with you a little bit more to kind of hone in on one of the numbers. You're probably a 2, 3, 4, just because if those are the numbers that you identify with, yeah, David is a 9. Yeah, peacemaker, exactly. Yeah, type in your number. What do you think you are? So let's say with David here, if you're a 9, my brother David, under stress, you can become too loyal, falling asleep at the wheel. In other words, you need to maybe rock the boat a little bit more. You need to get things done. You can tend to default. Speaking like at the beginning, I was talking about defaulting. Notice how the 3, the 6, and the 9 are all friends. We're in this triangle, right? The 3, 6, and the 9. So the 9, when healthy, here's what I would recommend for you, my brother David. Move to the 3. See how the 3 is the arrow that's going out, the black arrow. Notice the black tips. The 9 goes to the 3. So if you want to be in your health, show up, my brother David. Do something. All that thinking, all of that, like how do we balance life and how do we make everybody happy? Get in touch with what you want to do to help and do it. Act on your dreams. Act, not on your dreams, act on your insight. Act on your wisdom and your discernment. As I said, I have a daughter who's a 9. I love 9s. I want to be a 9. And the 9s want to be 3s. It's kind of funny. So now that's what I would say. And then be aware, my dear brother David, when you are going to that low side of 6, when you are giving in to that, becoming too comfortable in your PJs way too long. Not peace, but now you're actually questioning, are you really here for me or not? Do you really love me? Similar to the 4, which goes to the 2 under stress, similar, but a little more nuanced. They will question everything. They will wonder, well, who's really with me? Who's really for me and against me? Very unlike a 9, right? The 9 normally is at peace. They're like, the Zen masters, right? They are those hum people. Again, Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Everyone should be a 9. If I was to pick one number, I would say we need more 9s in this world, right? So, Brother David, you have a gift. But under stress, again, this is right now especially, you can tend to go to the 6, which is too loyal, too giving into sloth or to laziness, procrastinating. You want to move towards the healthy side of 3 and get things done. Now, back to Anne. Anne was saying 2, 3, 4. So assuming, Anne, that you are in that triad of 2, 3, 4, let's just, for the sake of argument, people compare me to a hippie. Okay, well, the hippies tend to be the 2s or the 4s. The 2s, I would say maybe the 4 are more what, just from studying this for so many years, what most people would say are the hippie types, are the 4, the individualists. Again, artists has nothing to do with painting or singing, although you might be very creative, but it's about your uniqueness. One of the things I say about 4s is that instead of them wearing Levi's like everyone else, let's say in high school, that they made their own pants. Instead of you wearing makeup like every other girl, you said, no way, I'm going to wear my own look. I'm going to have my own unique look. As I said, I thought I was a 4. Yeah, I thought I was a 4 in high school. And guess what I had in high school? I wasn't, even though I was kind of with the cool kids, sort of. This is what made me so unique. I had a jacket spray. I mean, an 80s kids, right? Like most of us here. I was an 80s kid. I had a airbrush jacket with eyes, and in the middle, it was just flames that said "On fire for Jesus." Now, I wasn't trying to be cool. I wasn't trying to be liked or even fit in. In fact, I was trying to go against fitting in. I was trying to be unique. And that's what made me come alive. And so if that relates to you, Anne, you might be a 4. Now, here's a way to look at it. Also, under stress. Under stress, as I said, the 4 goes to the low side of 2, meaning they can become, is that right? Yeah, meaning they become too attached. Codependent. I'm at a 9. I think maybe I'm a hippie. I'm a 4. Yeah. Okay. Sure, David. Yeah, that might be. Yeah. The 4, the hippies. Yeah. The 4 tends to be the hippies, the unique types. John the Baptist was probably either a 7 or a 4. Peter was probably an 8. I have this book that a friend of mine wrote called The Enneagram and the Way of Jesus. I recommend that. It's on Amazon. My friend AJ wrote that. And he uses biblical characters. And so the 4, John the Baptist, maybe he was also a 7. Peter was probably an 8. Jesus, again, he was all of these types, but most likely a 9. 3s, David probably was a 3. Maybe Saul was a 3. Let's see, who else was a 4? Maybe Elijah was probably a 4, in the cave a little too long, kind of like these highs and these lows, very creative. I mean, the Tower of the Mount Carmel, victory, and then the whispering of the, I didn't hear him in the storm. That's so 4. I didn't hear him in the earthquake. Oh, that's too normal. I heard him in the whisper. That's very much the 4s, right? So, Anne, tell me if that relates to you or if that connects with you, the artist, the romantic. Now, the romantic, obviously we think romantic love or relationships. That could be, but I would say the 4 draws people to themselves through their uniqueness. Back to my airbrush jacket, that's how I wasn't really trying to get girls or any of that. I was just being me. And one day, not in high school, but in college, my uniqueness, if I am a 4, I think I'm more of a 3, drew my lovely wife because I was being true to myself. So the 4, maybe one of their statements would be, I am true to myself. King Saul. So yeah, Anne, you're probably a 4. Okay, it could be. Again, you might be a 4-wing 3, a 4-wing 5. So there are these wings. And then the subtypes is very important. But again, now that's going to be another training. But back to David, he's saying King Saul. Yeah, King Saul was probably a 3 because he was full of himself. The 3s, when unhealthy, can be like, hey, look at all the feathers on my cap. Look at all the things that I'm accomplishing. And so if I'm not careful, again, I could be a 3 or a 4. If I'm not careful, I can come across as too into myself if I'm unhealthy. The 4, the same thing. The 4 can be so unique that they are at a touch with reality. So you have to kind of know yourself. They say, all the stuff I've read on this, is that you want to look back in your 20s. What were you like in your 20s? Because by your 20s, you tend to kind of identify a lot of who you are, or you're discovering who you are. And so you may want to think about, Anne, kind of what were you like in your 20s? college or post-college, 20s, mid-20s. As I said, for me in high school, I would say in my childhood, I was a 3 for sure. Then I went through a 4 season, and then now I'm back being a 3. So now, why all this? Well, the point is under stress. How do we grow in stature, in wisdom? Obviously, we pray. Obviously, we seek Jesus. We seek the Holy Spirit. But back to not wanting to default on our gifts. If you are a 4, I know, one more, Judas the betrayer. That's a good one, David. Let's see here. Judas the betrayer, probably a 1. Money people tend to be 1s or 6s because, again, very black and white. And remember that Judas, for all his betrayal, I mean, he was trying to make a deal, right? And even at the end, why did he kill himself? Because he felt so guilty. So my guess is that he was a 1. I was a loco. Yeah, that happens. 19. Yeah. Okay. So maybe were you a loco trying to bring harmony to your posse, to your friends, to your gang, to your community? There are different ways to express that 9 that 9 sin, whatever. So back to Judas. Very, very interesting question there, David. So my guess is he was probably a 1. Or a 6, they say that the money people, the money exchangers are 6s because they're very loyal. My bookkeeper, my accountant is probably a 6, and you want these people, or 5s. I mean, I would say maybe he was a 5 as well, because these are the thinkers. But I don't know how much of a thinker Judas was. He comes across to me as a 1 because of that black and whiteness. He, even though he did the wrong thing, which maybe goes against what I'm saying, he felt that deep sense of shame. And C1s feel a lot of anger, So notice those 3 letters or the 3 words in the middle: anger, image, and fear. So the 2, 3s, and 4s are very image conscious. The 5, 6, and 7s are very fear-based, and the 8, 9, and 1s are anger-based. They also call the 8, 9, and 1 the gut triad. So how people say follow your gut or listen to your gut? If you relate to that, you're probably in that 8, 9, and 1. If you relate to when people say lead with your heart, or maybe you sometimes are afraid of your heart, you might be a 2, 3, and 4. If you are a 5, 6, or 7, you might deal with, they call those the head triad, as in your mind. You're very much, you lead with facts, with data, with what is and what isn't. So I guess back to the beginning here, the point of all this, getting back to our original question, is how are you really doing this week? Scale from 1 to 10. Well, for me as a 3, I've had times when I've checked out, no doubt. Given in to the low side of 6, which is the fear, the anxiety, and thinking that I'm going through this and losing my mind and I'm going to lose my job and all these horrible things. And so what I've done, mute that music there, what I do to overcome that is to go to the high side of 6, which is to be faithful, to show up here for you. So again, that's how knowing your type really is helpful. So back to the 9 for David, go to that 3, move to that 3. If you want me to send you this diagram that I had there, maybe I'll post it at the bottom of this video, okay, on YouTube, Facebook, wherever, so that you guys can download this and just kind of keep it in mind. Or you can just take a screenshot. Maybe let me put this back on the screen so you can take a screenshot of it. Let me erase my beautifulness so you can then just see that there. You can take a screenshot of that so you can just kind of look at that and study it or remember what I said, review this video, etc. Victory. That's right. Victory in Jesus. And so you want to move, my dear brother, to 3, to achieving things for Christ, to being like, not like me in terms of who I am, but like other 3s. I am a 3. I'm sure you have other 3s in your life. Perhaps your wife is a 3. I don't know. We tend to marry who we want to be like or who's very much like us, right? Or kind of the opposite thing. But my point is, if you see someone who's getting things done, if you're more like an 8, new, happy, I tuned in. Good. Excellent, my dear brother David. Thank you for being here. So you want to move to that 3, to that high side of 3, not to the peacock, to the, hey, look at me, but to the achiever, getting things done for the kingdom of God, that warrior. And if you are a 4, you want to move to, what did we say? I don't have these memorized. I think it was the 2 is where you tend to go under stress, but the 4, oh yeah, goes to the 1 when healthy. Very black and white. So if you are a 4, Anne, you may want to move towards making the right decisions. Instead of like the hippie who might say, well, love is what matters and uniqueness. Well, maybe there's something that you need to actually decide on based on integrity. Use your integrity gifts. Ask the Holy Spirit to give you. I don't mean that 4s don't have integrity. I just mean that they make decisions based on right or wrong. What is right here? Not how I feel, not what do my emotions tell me, but what is the right thing to do here? Should I finish that homework? Should I pay those taxes? Should I, pay my mortgage? Should I don't know. Whatever you think that is the right thing to do, move towards that, even though your feelings might be getting in the way. So those are the things, my dear friends, that help us understand how we are really doing. I'm hoping to do these every night to check in with you. I love you. I am thankful for you. And share this broadcast because I'm sure people could use these tools. I get it. Yeah. Good, Ann. Share these tools. I'm sure people can benefit from these. These are things that are very helpful. You can go to EnneagramInstitute.com to find out your type. There's a ton of books that I have read. You can go on podcast apps and just type in Enneagram, and most of them are amazing. Probably my favorite, my 2 favorite authors in this, besides yours truly. I've written a couple of articles on this just on my website, davidtrigg.com. But besides what I've done, I'm being very 3 right now. Richard Rohr, and the second one is Ian Cron. Ian Cron wrote a book called Chasing Francis. And then Richard Rohr, I think he wrote a book called The Way of the Enneagram, I believe is his book. Both of them, certainly, thank you, David. You too, my brother. Ian Cron has a podcast called Typology, which is amazing. And then Richard Rohr, I think he's mostly on YouTube and he writes a lot. And then there's another amazing lady, she calls herself the grandmother of the Enneagram, or the godmother. And her podcast is called, let's see, I have it here. Her name is Susan Stabile, I believe is her name. Susan Stabile. And let me see here. Her podcast, let's see here. It's called The Enneagram Journey with Susan Stabile. Yeah, The Enneagram Journey. So you may want to, I don't know, you can't see that there, but yeah, you can't see that. But she is on podcast app and Android and all that stuff. I also have a ton of stuff. I have done some videos on this very topic. I'm not certified with the Enneagram. I am certified as a mental health coach, but I've been studying the Enneagram for 10 years, and so I know enough to be dangerous, as I say. If you would love for me to coach you in the Enneagram, I would love to help you, sit down with you, text with you, whatever it is. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Just type in on Google Enneagram and you will be overwhelmed. Together we should do communion again. I know, how wasn't that beautiful, Dave? Didn't I drop, I think, Jesus, right? That was terrible. Man, I should be taking notes. Yeah, notes are very helpful. But just review this video and type in Enneagram. And like with anything, take it with a grain of salt, just slowly, one little bit at a time. Give me Johnny Cash songs, please. Popol Peter. All right. Well, I normally do songs, but not Johnny Cash per se. Maybe I look like Johnny Cash. I don't think so. But thank you so much, Pope L. Peter 8, for your comment on Twitch. Thank you for being here. And by the way, we're streaming live here to 6 different platforms, to Instagram Live, to Twitch, which is a very popular platform for gamers and others. Of course, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, and all the rest. Go to my website, davidtrigg.com. There's all kinds of resources there for the virus and Enneagram stuff. Music, of course. Wow, you're really businessman. I do love to help people. What else can you play? Well, I can play bass and guitar. I would say my favorite thing is to sing. I write a lot of songs. I make hip-hop beats and lo-fi. So God has been faithful. Thank you so much, Pope L. Peter. And David Nichols, yeah, thank you. You are amazing. Thank you again, Pope L. Peter 8. System of It's a great band. I would say Radiohead and maybe Post Malone are more what I do. A lot of those guys is kind of what I really am into, as well as salsa and a lot of Latin stuff. I grew up in Latin America. So, well, guys, thank you so much. Again, share this broadcast. Let your friends know, your followers. Go ahead and press that notification. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Go to YouTube. I have a lot of my videos there as a library playlist where you can really dive deep and get into all of my content. Facebook is fine, but wherever you are. Also go to my website, davidtrigg.com, and you can download a lot of free stuff, how to podcast, how to learn all about the Enneagram, obviously how to be a woman, a man of faith in these crazy opportunity times. I call this an opportunity more than a crisis. Remember, one of the questions I always say to myself is, what does this make possible? What does this make possible? Thank you again for being here. Thank you, everybody, for your awesome support, for tuning in. Share this broadcast with your friends. Leave a comment. I'll see you next time.